Dr. Daniels was raised by a single mother in a section of Spanish Harlem with the highest rate of violent crime in New York City. And despite all of that, he managed to receive a full scholarship to Dartmouth College, where he graduated Phi Beta Kappa in 1985. He later received a public interest law scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania Law School, where he obtained both his law degree and a master's in public administration. He was subsequently awarded a doctoral fellowship in American politics to study judicial policymaking and the rule of law at Brandeis University. I'm not going to go through all the details of his bio here. It's rather extensive, but I will highlight a few things for you. Not only is he a scholar, but he is a bit of an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur. He's worked with Sequoia Capital, the lead backer of YouTube and Google. He's been a major Templeton Foundation grant recipient, which he used to found Good of All, an international public education movement dedicated to promoting universal human rights in the digital age. And so between Sequoia Capital and the internet and the concept of natural rights and universal human rights, he's married these things up to figure out ways to promote the ideas of natural rights on an international level using digital social media. He's established academic centers on 4 continents at this point: South Korea, the United Kingdom, here in the United States, and in Central America. He's reached over 50 million people online in multiple languages. He has drafted curricula that has been approved by a number of states. In fact, some states, at least a half dozen states, have passed legislation mandating that the topics of his curricula be taught in the public schools. He has managed to get agreements with McGraw-Hill Education, one of the leading publishers of primary and secondary textbooks, to agree to publish and distribute his curricula on these topics. He has adapted those curricula to multiple different venues. There's a version for corporate training. There's a version for Catholic parochial schools. There's a version for youth groups and Bible studies. There's a new version coming out for a college undergrad version coming out. He's gotten the endorsements of, well, I won't even list all of that. He did, one of the greatest things he ever did was he came out with a book called Human Liberty 2.0, and I'm extremely biased because I was asked to edit that volume. And so I think it's a pretty good piece of work if you ever get a chance to look that one up. But we're already behind, so I'm just going to shut up now and ask Dr. Daniels to come up and give us his presentation. Thanks, Matt.
I'm grateful to you folks for being here. I'm also pleased to see a lot of old friends in the room. It's kind of nice to come back to DC and see many people who I know and respect. I was pondering the history of this museum as a monument and a memorial to the victims of communist ideology and the struggle against communism that played such a central role in the Cold War. And I thought I would start with this observation. The Berlin Wall collapsed without a bullet being fired or a bomb being dropped because the ideas that had animated the Soviet Union's expansionist dreams dried up. And that is a picture of how we win the war on terror. Not with bombs or bullets, but by defeating the ideas that animate these violent extremist movements, because when no one will sign up to die for them or fight for them, the war is won. For reasons we all understand, there's a lot of money invested in kinetic warfare against the manifestations of these ideologies. Sometimes that's necessary. But if that's the sum total of our strategy, we'll ultimately lose the battle because ideas cannot be defeated with bombs or bullets. They are only ultimately defeated with superior ideas. So that was the genesis of this effort that I've been working on for about a decade. We wanted to take the ideas that won the Cold War and redeploy them in the digital age. One of the great things about the era in which we're living is that I broke your sign, I'm sorry, is that you can reach entire populations of young people now online in a way that wasn't possible during the Cold War. And you can bypass all sorts of intermediary institutions and gatekeepers and engage in that battle for the hearts and minds of the next generation directly. In most cases, you can reach pretty much everyone in the country if you know how to use the internet. So we wanted to find a way to use the historically unmatched power of the web as a communications vehicle to deploy the same ideas that won the Cold War to a new generation. And that was the beginning of this journey. You've got a couple of handouts there with some of our endorsements. Over the years, we've been endorsed by two former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs, the former commander of NATO, Admiral Stavridis, who's been a great supporter, the Attorney General of the UK and Wales, the head of the Chief of Police Association for the UK and Wales. All of these leaders recognize that we are underutilizing the tools of the digital age when many of our adversaries are specializing in using the tools of the digital age to spread their ideologies via the web. And as I said earlier, those efforts by various violent extremist groups cannot be stopped with bombs or bullets. And those efforts are increasingly going to play a role on the home front here in America. I mean, it's no surprise that in the last few months we've seen a series of terrorist attacks on American soil. This is really sort of inevitable that this would occur. And part of why we're building this movement is to try to undermine that phenomenon. Now, in the West, there are two major barriers to winning the war against these ideologies online. One barrier, which I probably don't have to spend a lot of time on for those in this room, is the mistake of cultural relativism, right? The error that we cannot assert that some ideas are better than others, that some values are better than others, that some principles are transcendent, that some are right and that some are wrong. Once we tie ourselves up with moral relativism, we've essentially tied our hands behind our back and surrendered in the great battle of ideas. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I don't think we have too many ardent cultural relativists in this room. The other mistake that we're still making is an over-reliance on hard power. As you know, most of the folks who are involved in counterterrorism come from a law enforcement or military background. And so they're trained in hard power, they're trained in kinetic warfare, and they're not sufficiently trained in the war of ideas. But the smarter minds among military and national security leaders recognize the importance of ideas in fighting the war on terror. So one of my favorite quotes is from Admiral Stavridis, who wrote one of those articles that you have, when he was commander of NATO. He used to say, "We should launch 10 good ideas for every Tomahawk missile that we fire, and it would be a lot cheaper." Sound familiar to what we're doing today? Now, let me get to the substance of what we do. It's actually fairly simple. How we deliver our content is a little more complicated, but let me talk to you about the substance. Everywhere I go, evil has exactly the same structure or same script. Evil operates with remarkable consistency all around the world. And it's what I call the 3 Ds. Demonize, dehumanize, destroy. It's the same script everywhere. It proves the unitary character of evil. There's no other way to explain it. You can do this with race, so white racists do this. Demonize, dehumanize, destroy. You can do this with ideology. Communists do it, fascists do it. You can do it with religion. ISIS and Al-Qaeda do it. And you can even do it with tribal differences. In Rwanda, they did it with tribal differences, demonized, dehumanized, destroyed. From now until the end of history, there will only be one cure for the 3Ds, and that's what I call the 1D, the dignity of the human person. If I can get the 1D into your heart and mind before you're reached by the 3Ds, I can substantially reduce the ability of the 3Ds to weaponize you into an engine of destruction. And that's the enterprise that we're involved in. And it's pretty simple. I mean, think of it in terms of a medical analogy. When I was here in D.C., I used to tell all my friends in the counterterrorism community that I thought the term counterterrorism was bass-ackwards. And I used to explain it this way. If I'm an oncologist and you come to me and I tell you that my strategy for treating your cancer is counter-tumorism, you're going to die because I need a strategy to eradicate the cancer, not to treat the symptoms. And or think of the polio analogy. I can wait until you get polio and treat your symptoms, or I can vaccinate you and you never get polio. And it's a lot better to vaccinate people against these ideas before they've been radicalized. Which brings us to the question of how to do that. And, there are probably many ways to do it. I'll talk about the method that we use. This came to me through one of my mentors, the founder of Disney Interactive. He's no longer with Disney, but he founded several divisions of Disney. And when I met him, he sat me down and he said, he said, when governments and universities and nonprofits try to harness the educational power of the internet for educational purposes, they get the equation backwards. And they create content that only a captive audience will watch. So what they always do is they try to educate first. And so they create something that you can make your students watch, but they're not going to voluntarily watch it in their free time. He said, if you want to unlock the power of the internet for educational purposes, you must entertain first. If you entertain, you earn the right to educate, because the internet is an entertainment medium. And that little insight was pivotal for us in our efforts. So we began working on what we call an edutainment model. And the edutainment model is designed to ride the highway of entertainment content online to reach young minds and to deliver the antidote to the 3Ds. Now, when you're trying to entertain online, you're in the middle of a furious competition for eyeballs among some very well-funded entities, streaming services, Hollywood studios, gaming companies. How does a charity, an NGO, compete for eyeballs online? This led us to come up with our borrowed equity model. And our borrowed equity model was to do reviews of films and games themed around universal rights, which under fair use is totally legal. If it's non-commercial, if it's short, you can essentially borrow the production values of Hollywood and the gaming industry and all the star appeal of these industries and deliver a message to young people about fundamental rights. And we got fairly good at doing this. If you do it right, if you do it right, it works like a charm. And so that's what we've been working on for the past decade or so. We've pioneered this in Arabic and English. It's done well in both. Our YouTube channel is in English, but we have other platforms in Arabic and Farsi. We're also using the power of short-form video. As you guys know, I'm sure, short-form video is the lingua franca of our age. It's how you communicate ideas. And so if it isn't in video form, preferably under 3 minutes, it's very hard to get anyone to hear what you're saying. So our videos tend to be 3 minutes or less. Another dimension to this, I'll try to explain. Throughout human history, most societies that have survived have had this concept that older people have something to teach younger people. It's called wisdom, right? And so you look up to your elders, you learn from your elders. Well, the digital revolution has really destroyed that dynamic, especially in the West. You do still see it a little bit in the East. But because of the digital divide, young people born after the internet have made the arguably ignorant and arguably arrogant mistake of thinking that everything that came before the internet is irrelevant to them. And generations that came before the internet have nothing to say to them. That's why those of you who have children, you know, you'll tell your child something and you get the deer in the headlights look, right? And then a year later they come back to you and they say, hey, I heard this thing from my friend on Facebook. And I'm your parent and I've told you that 10 times and you never listened. And your friend on Facebook may not even be real, by the way, right? But they're more likely to listen to their friend on Facebook. So we built into our model an ability to harness that. The reason I was busy creating these academic programs on several continents is we would go out and we would train young people at universities to become content creators for our channel so that the ideas that we were trying to disseminate could be heard in the voices of the peers of our audience. So young people in Korea can reach an audience that we could never reach. Young people in Costa Rica can reach a Central American and South American audience. Same thing for the UK. We're actually, our classes were international. And that formula that I just described to you was far more successful than even we expected. And it had a number of interesting results. We discovered that our fastest growing audience demographic online was young Muslim women who love our message of fundamental rights and human dignity, which is often not available to them in their culture. And that to this day has remained true. I'm going to give you a quantitative reference in terms of evidence about the effectiveness of our program, and then an anecdotal one. I find the anecdotal one more compelling because I experienced it. But let me start with the quantitative. So when we started the channel, this was during the heyday of ISIS, when ISIS was recruiting young people from a number of European countries, including the UK and some from the US and Australia, including women who were signing up to join ISIS, amazingly. And the British government was very concerned about this. And so they funded a study of our material at the University of Nottingham. They took 1,000 high school students and exposed them to our content. And they found that we really did move the needle in terms of their values on a number of core indices of how they would respond to questions about violence. So that's the quantitative evidence. The anecdotal evidence, I'll give you one story. I was teaching in London, and it was in a neighborhood called West London. West London is an immigrant neighborhood. So if you have friends in central London who are British citizens, I can guarantee you none of them have ever been to West London. It's past the last stop on the tube, right? The New York analogy would be, after you get to the last stop in Queens. It's an immigrant neighborhood. I used to tell people that if you took all the Puerto Ricans out of Spanish Harlem and replaced them with Pakistanis, you'd have West London. So it was very familiar territory to me. And I find myself teaching a class that's majority Muslim in West London at a law school. And the interesting thing about West London, the conservative Muslim families will allow their sons to go to Oxford or Cambridge, but the girls have to be home at night. So you have some very bright young women in what is essentially a second-tier law school. And they all have the hijab, and some, if they're from a conservative family, have the niqab. So there I am in West London teaching this material, which is interesting. And I had a young woman who was sitting in the back from a Pakistani family, immigrant family. She had the niqab, and she wouldn't speak. I do Socratic teaching, interactive teaching, and I couldn't get her to speak. And I was just getting very concerned. Am I reaching her? Why is she here? And so one day, we were talking about legal equality for women, and I was showing some videos from our channel done by, this particular video was done by one of my American students who's from an Indian background, and it's on the terrible suffering of women in the untouchable class in India, particularly in rural areas where they have essentially no rights. It's a terrible situation. And so we're showing this video, and all of a sudden the girl in the back with the niqab bangs her hand on the desk and says, "That's happening in my country, that's happening to my friends, I can't talk about it, my family gets angry if I talk about it." And so the whole class goes silent, and I said, "Well, Fatima, we need to know this, our audience needs to know this. I hope that you will consider creating content that shares this with our audience." We don't put their face or their name on the videos, so there's no chance of retribution. They're just an anonymous narrator, but they have the whole web as their audience, right? So she ended up doing videos on forced marriage of underage girls, honors killings, acid attacks, and rape. And the stories in these videos are hair-raising, and it was when I really began to realize the international media doesn't really tell you the full story of what some of these women are suffering in some of these countries. And at the end of the class, she came up to me and she said, "You know, Professor," she said, "I just have to tell you, this class is the first place I've been able to say what I think." And I said, "Fatima, you just validated my whole teaching career." I said, "It was all worth it. That's it. I don't need to do anything else now." And I came to think of the veil and the niqab as almost like a symbol of a mind that is in a prison. And it fell off in my class. And as she walked out, I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, Lord, there's millions of Fatimas online. You just showed me a picture of what we can do right in front of my eyes. And this is the path that we have to travel." So this is the path we've been on for some time. I'm going to show you a couple of examples just so you can get some context. Please bear in mind, everything I'm showing you, originally, we did the original versions in Arabic. So I'm going to show you the English versions that are on our YouTube channel. Can we show the Dreamer? Oh, and there's one video I'm going to show you. It's a little short. It's our effort to provide a short history and synopsis of the Universal Declaration. My Disney mentor had this done at a studio in LA. So we got actors to represent the historical figures. We shot them on green screen, but the audio that you hear is the actual voices of the historical figures. So,
the heart of humanity will never recover from what mankind discovered it could do to destroy itself during World War II. The ballistic missiles and the extermination of 15 million souls by Adolf Hitler was unprecedented. All actions have reactions. On December 10th, 1948, 48 countries came together and signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt showed us it was more than a legal document that was ahead of its time. It represented a dream. No matter who we are all born with certain inalienable rights. A dream that had to be personified in reality.
There is no cause for which I am prepared to kill.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
Some people call me the girl who was shot by the Taliban. I am those 66 million girls who are deprived of education.
They cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them.
I still have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed.
And through our pain, we will make them see their injustice, and it will hurt.
When my world suddenly changed, my priorities changed too. I am not a lone voice. I am many.
So that's the kind of brand we're offering to the world. There's a thread that runs through human history of these transcendent principles. You find them in the work of many.
Disaster and injustice seems to
that's our
plague
trailer.
our world.
And I think the world is still, I know from experience, wide open to this message. And the more I do this work, the more I believe that the internet is an underutilized asset in the battle against violent extremist groups. I will tell you, just a little side note, I made an effort once to launch an academic center in a Muslim-majority country. We've actually made several, but I'll tell you the story of one country. I won't name the country. And I had a Chinese entrepreneur who had founded the #2 university in the country who wanted us to set up a center, and everything was going wonderfully. And then I was called in by the education ministry of the country and sort of interrogated about my intentions. And they said, why are you here? Well, to spread the principles of universal rights. And who's your audience? Young people. And does that include Muslim young people? Yes, of course it includes Muslim young people. And the education minister for this particular country said, well, I don't like that. And ultimately stopped us. But we did have a little interesting side conversation while I was sitting in his office, and we're talking about the internet. And he said, oh, the internet, I hate the internet. My kids are on the internet. I don't know what they're watching. I don't know who they're talking to. And I remember saying, well, I know you're going to throw me out of your country, but you've at least validated my model. So thank you. All right. Oh, and could I get another water when you change? The next one you're going to show you, this again was also originally in Arabic. It did very well in Arabic, but I'll show you the English version. It's a review of the film Aquaman.
With its underwater battle scenes, armored sharks, and vast sea monsters, Aquaman looks like just another superhero movie. But this fantastical tale has a surprisingly important message. The movie opens when the Queen of Atlantis washes up on shore and falls in love with a regular man. Flying in the face of convention, Queen Atlanta decides to stay on land and raise a child with the man she loves.
My parents were from different worlds. And I was a product of a love that never should have been. A son of the land and a son of the seas.
The authorities in Atlantis are far from happy that their queen has fallen in love with a land dweller. So they kidnap her and forcibly return her to Atlantis.
He could unite our worlds one day.
It might sound like a fairy tale, but the truth is, this is far from fiction. Around the world today, millions of people are prevented from traveling freely. In North Korea, citizens are prevented by law from traveling abroad, or even traveling freely around their own country.
We are not the master of our life because always the regime makes decisions for us.
In Saudi Arabia, women are denied the right to leave the country without the permission of, you guessed it, a man.
The political structures that have existed for decades remain today.
Once she's returned to Atlantis, Queen Atlanta is sentenced to death for the crime of marrying a land dweller. Once again, this is the horrific reality for millions of people around the world, whose choices in marriage are coerced and even forced upon them as children.
I asked my parents, why did you marry me off like that? I was so innocent. I asked, how old was I? They said 11 months.
While some even face capital punishment for marrying outside of their religion.
تحاول أن ترفع صوتها بمطالبة بحقوقها ومطالبة بحريتها ودائما تتعرض للبطش والقهر والتنكيل.
This isn't how it should be. Under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, no one can be forced into marriage through coercion or threat of punishment. And everyone has the right to travel freely within their country or to go abroad. Around the world, the fight for freedom goes on. Share this video and make your voice heard.
So that's what we do. Usually, we're only trying to deliver one point in a short video, but the cumulative effect of this over time has given us an audience of about 50 million online. Now, Al asked me to talk about an area that we have been delving into as a bit of an experiment, but it's a very important experiment because it extends our brand into the realm of gaming. So some of you may be aware of what a cultural tsunami gaming represents. I'm going to give you some old data. I think it's 6 years old. But 6 years ago, the BBC reported that gaming makes more money than every other form of entertainment combined. Are you aware of this? If you take all of film, all of sports, all of music, all of streaming and put it together, gaming makes more money. That's an economic measure of what a cultural tsunami it is. And so there's a whole generation of gamers now coming. And I realized that we could actually expand our model into the gaming space. We obviously have gaming reviews. We have lots of them that are done according to this same structure that you saw here. But there's a twist to gaming. Does anybody know what a gaming mod is? A mod? So a mod is where you insert some code into the game to alter some feature of the game, like introduce a new character, introduce a new scene. And many of the gaming companies, the smarter ones, are very friendly to modding because it creates a secondary market for their game. So you have to buy their game. Then if you, probably the most modded game, believe it or not, is Grand Theft Auto. And you buy Grand Theft Auto, and then you can download a mod where you can play as SpongeBob or whatever. They're all very silly. Some of them very creative, actually. And we realized that we could start modifying video games in ways that would allow us to essentially hijack their visual assets, which in some cases are worth astonishing amounts of money, and rewrite the storyline around whatever we wanted for our educational purposes. And so we had this notion of testing this with Grand Theft Auto. This was right around the time that the Saudis lifted the driving ban, and were making a lot of public noise about how enlightened they were. But as you know, the legal status of women in Saudi Arabia is roughly equivalent to that of a minor child, right? You can't really do anything of any legal significance without the permission of a male guardian. So you can't buy a plane ticket, you can't get a job, you can't get health care without the permission of a male guardian. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to do a mod of Grand Theft Auto where we inserted a Saudi woman who had just won her right to drive and drives around and finds out that she can't do all of these things even though she has a car, right? So I'll show you one clip. If you're not gamers, I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but if any of you have played games, you might appreciate it. What I did was we inserted a Saudi female driver into Grand Theft Auto. She doesn't exist in the game. We created a new trailer that doesn't exist in the game. And then I got some of my students, so these are not professional voice actors, give them a break. They're students at some of my schools, and they used the characters in the game to role play a bunch of scenarios. We did 6 of them. I'll show you one. This is one where she goes to the airport and can't get a plane ticket. And so we'll show this. And just by the way, we don't offer this to you as a video that teaches driving skills because it's more interesting to drive against traffic in the game. So she drives against traffic. But let's run this.
So, are you seeking to travel outside Saudi Arabia?
Yes, my husband is finishing a business trip in France, and I want to join him there for a vacation afterwards.
Everything appears to be in order so far.
Perfect. We've been looking forward to this vacation.
The last thing I'll need is for him to approve you purchasing a ticket.
Of course. Wait, what?
I'll need a guardian's approval before I can give you a plane ticket.
Is there some effort to get me to bribe you?
I do not care for the insinuations you are making, ma'am.
And I don't care for your nonsense. We've already agreed to the trip. Why can't I buy a plane ticket to see him?
These are the rules. Simple as that. If you have any more problems, take them up with your husband.
Oh, I think I can do better than that. Cars are not the only thing women can drive.
So a whole series of scenarios like that. Why am I showing you this? Because there are many creative ways for us to now engage a digital generation in this struggle against the 3Ds on behalf of the 1D of human dignity. And we absolutely have to do it because otherwise the ideas that are threatening democracy around the world will win the battle for the hearts and minds of a digital generation. So our founders gave us a wonderful dream, a dream that unleashes human potential, economic potential, social prosperity. It's a dream rooted in transcendent truth, that people are endowed by their Creator with certain universal or inalienable rights. And the best way for us to keep that dream alive in the digital age is to harness the tools of the web. And if we do it right, the dream will become a greater reality in our lifetime. And the ideologies that we're fighting, including jihadism and others, will fade into history like a bad nightmare, just as the Soviet Union and its expansionist vision faded into history at the end of the Cold War. So that's what we're about. Thank you.